Hi, this is Taylor Otwell back with another Laravel screencast. And in this screencast, I wanted to talk a little bit about dependency injection in Laravel 4. There's been a lot of talk recently about dependency injection and service location and Laravel facades and basically keeping them all straight and which does Laravel support, which do they not support, etc. So in this screencast, I want to show you how you can do actually thorough dependency injection and inversion of control with unit testing in Laravel 4 without touching any facades if you don't want to. Okay, so facades are basically a form of service location which some people aren't comfortable with, so I can show you how to avoid them if you want. It's actually really easy. I've actually got a routes file. I've cleared out the default stuff. I created a services file where we can put all of our IoC bindings if we need any. And I've created a little post controller here which we'll use for our demo. Okay, now our post controller has this show posts method. First, I'm going to set up a route for that in our routes file. There are two ways to do this. You can say app route or app router to get to the router instance off of the IoC container, and you can say get post controller show post, okay, to register that route. The other way would be to use the facade, which just accesses the same thing in the IoC container, but we'll just use the container directly for now. This app variable is actually an instance of app new foundation application, and that is created in your bootstrap start file at the very top. So this routes file is actually still in that chain of includes of kind of bootstrap includes, so this app variable is still available. It's just the IoC container for the application. Okay, so we're going to set up our route. Now in our post controller, you can see I'm calling this post get popular, but I haven't actually set post to anything yet. So how do we get this variable into our controller? What I've done is I've actually created a post repository interface with a get popular method, which corresponds to the get popular that we're calling right here in our controller. So this post repository interface also has a database post repository implementation where I'm just returning a dummy array of data. Normally I would hit my database connection in here, which you can inject via Illuminate Database Manager. So for now, we'll just return a dummy array though for the purposes of this screencast, so I don't have to configure up the database and stuff. But that's all there is to it. So what we want to do is inject an implementation of post repository interface into this controller. So how do we do that? Well, in Laravel 4, actually dependency injection is probably easier in Laravel 4 than almost any other full stack framework because it is actually on by default on all of your controllers. So if I can spell here, all you need to do is say post repository interface. All you do is type pin it, and the container will automatically read those type hints on your controllers by default. You don't have to config that, and it will inject it. Now, one thing we do need to tell it though is which implementation of the interface do we want to use. Remember, we can't instantiate an interface directly. We have to instantiate an implementation of it, and the container has no way to know what default implementation to use unless we tell it. So of course, we want to use the database post repository in this instance since it's our only implementation. So what I'm going to do is come into services and again say app bind post repository interface, and I'm going to bind it to database post repository. That just says, hey, anytime you need an implementation of post repository interface, inject database post repository as the instance. So when we type in this, we should get our database post repository injected into our controller. So if I just dump that, and then I'll go ahead and hit that post route that we defined. Let's see, this is Laravel, or I'm sorry, workbench.app/post. Post repository interface not instantiable. Okay, what that means is the container is basically saying, hey, I didn't know where to get that post repository. The reason is I didn't include our little services guy. But if you see this error, it means, hey, I'm trying to resolve something, the post repository interface, which you type pinned it on your controller, but I have no binding to work with. You can see it's a binding resolution exception. So all you need to do is make sure you're including your binding, which mine is in the services.php file, and so that the container will know which implementation to use. Okay, so now if we hit that route, we should get a database post repository instance, which looks good. That is the correct implementation, and it was automatically injected into this controller. Now, what if you need the request? You can see if I go ahead and put a request variable here, how you can actually get the request is, let's say we want an instance of Illuminate HTTP request, which this extends the Symfony request, the Symfony HTTP Foundation request, and our Laravel version of it just adds a few methods, maybe a dozen methods to make a few things a little easier. All we're going to do here is just add this to the constructor. I'm sorry. Okay, so we just say request, and we can go ahead and set it. Okay, and I'm just going to dump that out again for you so we can see what we get. So let's hit that route. Okay, you can see I got an object, Illuminate HTTP request. And so now, wait a second, how did the container know to inject this? I didn't do any app bind or anything. And the reason is that for most concrete instances, you don't have to do anything. And when I say concrete, I mean something that doesn't, that's not an interface, you know, or something like that, or an abstract class or something. Okay, this is a concrete instance. I can just type in it. The container will say, oh, request, I know how to resolve that, and it will inject it in, and everything's great. So that's really all I need to do there. Now, I did leave this view make call as a facade, and I'll show you how to switch it here in a second. I'm saying view make hello, which if we look at my hello view, all I'm doing here is just echo var export on whatever I pass in, just so we can see what we're passing to the view. Okay, so I'm just passing in the post. So if we let this call, what we would expect to see is basically just the return of our get popular, so which is just post 1, 2, and 3. So if I hit the post route, let's go ahead and hit that. You can see there's just the dummy post 1, 2, 3. But how do I get rid of this view make? And the reason I left it as a facade is so I could talk a little bit about when are maybe static methods or service locators appropriate. And one is, let's say you have a string function like foo. Okay, that's basically a static method, more or less. That's a globally available method. And the reason that's okay, the reason that's not necessarily a bad thing, is the output of a string function like that is only computed from its input variables. So the input and output is totally predictable. Given a certain input, the output is a 100% predictable for string to upper. And it's usually the exact same way with views. So the hello view is static HTML, and as long as you're not making database calls, given a predictable input of variables into that view, the output will be the exact same every time. So making a facade call there, I don't consider really to be bad architecture per se. It's still testable. The HTML is the same, but let's just pretend you want to just be totally thorough and not using any facades. What you're actually going to do is inject the view factory here, and that corresponds to illuminate view environment. And I'm just going to alias that out to view factory. And now you can set it views, and then you can just say this views make. Okay, so there you've gotten rid of that view facade call there. And you can find out what class corresponds to a facade in the Laravel documentation. There is a facade to class reference under the facade documentation, so you can look that up. Now if we hit this, we should get the same thing. I don't have to configure anything. The container will automatically, you can see that's working fine. Container knows how to get view factory. That's a concrete instance. It will inject it in automatically. Okay, so there you go. We've gotten rid of all of our facade calls in this Laravel application. Now let's write some tests. I've already set up a little dummy test, so I didn't have to type that out. But what you want to do is just say mock post, and we're going to mock post repository interface. And I'm just going to say mock post should receive, what was it? Get popular once and return some dummy array. Let's just say popular. What you're going to do here is say this app, this gets you to your container. You're going to say, I want to set post repository interface to this mock post. It's going to use that instance all the time. Now, now I can just make a call to that action. All you need to do in Laravel is this get action, or this action pass get for my HTTP verb. It's post controller. I think it's show post. Let me just confirm that. Okay, that looks good. And really that's all we need to do. It's going to use that mock. The container's going to use that mock automatically. And our expectations all set up. Our test should be green here because it's going to check that should receive expectation. So if I hit my test here, I would expect to see green. I'm doing this live. Okay, so that's green, one test. Mockery shows 0 assertions. PHP unit would show 1 assertion if you're using that. Another thing we can do here is say this assert true response is okay. You can do other stuff. You can inspect the HTML using Symfony DOM crawler. You can do whatever you want. But there you go, 1 assertion passed. So there you go. That's thorough dependency injection Laravel with unit tests.